Oops, let me get this out of the way. All right, this level is called organization of multicellular organisms. And this only applies to multicellular organisms because single cell organisms can't have more than one cell, as obvious as that may sound. So unicellular organisms do not apply. They don't have this type of organization that we're going to go over right now. All right, so the most basic type of organization you'll see are called atoms. Sometimes these are called elements, and I'll do some examples in a different color. So the examples of atoms or elements, the most common one is probably going to be carbon. Right, so carbon is an element. Hydrogen is a very common one you'll see in biology. And maybe oxygen, because water is oxygen is in water. So these are like the simplest forms of matter. Now, when you have two or more atoms, they can combine to form molecules. So that's our next level of organization, right? So we're just organizing a bunch of terms in this lesson. Okay, and examples of molecules might be like water is a very common molecule. So notice that has two hydrogens and one oxygen. So, when you have two or more of these atoms combining, we get molecules. Okay, a couple other examples are like lipids, carbohydrates, proteins. We'll talk more about these in Unit 2, carbohydrates, proteins, and nucleic acids. These are all examples of molecules, and there's tons more. All right, once you have molecules, they form organelles, and eventually they'll form cells. All right, now this is where we first get to a category called biotic. All right, biotic means living. All right, so starting from cells, these have the characteristics of living things. All right, so another way to say this is you would not consider molecules living, and you wouldn't consider atoms living, right? Because well, I think you know why. All right, but cells are considered living. Now, cells, when you have two or more cells that work together, they form what's called tissue or tissue. So if you have two or more muscle cells, you can form muscle tissues. Two or more nerve cells forming nerve tissues. And so on the keystones, there are four types of tissues. I'll do this in red because these are the ones you need to know in detail. So we have your muscle tissue, and so you want to associate that with movement. Right, muscle is used to move. You also have nerve tissues. Right, and nerve tissues are used to send and receive messages. Right, I'm just writing the key word, so if you see something like this in a reading passage or a question, you know to associate, hey, that's a nerve tissue or that's a muscle tissue. Right, and the third one is kind of tricky for students because it's not very familiar, is epithelial tissue. And these are tissues that line organs or cover organs, let's just say covering. All right, so your heart is covered by an epithelial lining or tissue, and so are your lungs, and your organs are covered with this kind of tissue, otherwise it would just spill out, I suppose. All right, and the final type of tissue is your connective tissue. All right, this is like a catch-all. It's the remaining, it's everything else, all right, at this level. That would include your fat, the bones in an animal, if it is, and like blood. Even though blood is a mostly liquid or a fluid, it's still considered a type of tissue. All right, when you have two or more tissues that work together, we have an organ. Okay, so for example, if you have a muscle tissue working with nerve tissue, with epithelial tissue, with some fat tissue, you can get, that might be a heart organ, okay, or the lungs, or the liver, or the kidney. And there's actually too many to list at this stage. right? But you do need to know your four types of tissues. All right, tissues make up organs, and multiple organs that work together. And then that's the key. You can't have separate organs not working together, but working together, you get an organ system. Okay, organ systems are like your cardiovascular system, which would include your blood, your heart, your blood vessels, and all those organs that are used to transport your nutrients throughout your body. All right, finally, I'm running out of space, but you would keep going here. All the organ systems working together form the whole organism. That's the living thing, living being. All right, and again, just to emphasize, all of this stuff here, past cells, are considered living, right? Which is what biotic means. All right, so I have a screenshot here of two very common examples of this organization. All right, this is in our presentation. All right, so here's an illustration of cells, just a generic cell making up, this looks like a muscle tissue, and muscle tissue making up your heart, which is an organ, and the organ system here, the cardiovascular system, and then all the systems together make up your zebra, the organism here in this example. All right, same thing with plants. Plants have cells that make up tissues, all right, that make up organs. So leaves are organs, and then the organ system, and then the entire tree would be the organism. Okay, so when an organism is made up of more than one cell, in fact, trillions of cells usually, they'll have this kind of organization, all right, and you need to know the sequence of this organization.